there. Welcome to this week's episode of Becoming More Me, the podcast for busy-minded entrepreneurs that want to be more and do less. I'm your host, Theresa Levine, and while there's a lot of names for what I do and how I do it, it all boils down to helping people get out of their own way. Creating new patterns, eliminating habits that aren't serving us, and getting rid of those limiting beliefs and things that just make everything harder. And when we can get out of our own way and reclaim our power, it's amazing what we can call into our life and manifest. So, what would it take for you to grant yourself permission to be your full self? Today, I'm talking to Gregg Berman, who is an awesome coach and guide for those who want to get more in connection with nature, maybe even try something like forest bathing. And we'll talk about that and what it is. Gregg was also a client of mine during 2022 and 2023. We made some cool breakthroughs together. We'll talk about what all of that did for him and how it correlated to what he's doing now. And we're going to go beyond his professional pursuits. We're going to dive into his personal interests, hobbies, and his own journey from becoming a nurse to embracing human growth and empowerment through nature and really embodying advocacy for authentic relating and personal development, as well as a unique connection with nature. And we'll discuss the transformative power of EFT, the importance of embracing the messiness of being human, and the continuous pursuit of self-improvement as we uncover more ways for you to more fully become yourself. It all starts now. Welcome, Gregg. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Theresa. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you too. So I love to dive in and just talk about who you are outside of work and all the wonderful things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about where you live, who you like to spend your time with, and maybe even some hobbies or interests that you have.
Sounds good. I live in tiny town, Moss Beach, California, which is, well, depending on traffic, half hour to an hour south of San Francisco. But
Your traffic sounds like it's like our traffic in metro area DC.
yeah, exactly. Thankfully here, right where I live, it's not bad, and the town is so small that I can go away from my house without locking my door. The ocean is literally right outside my front door. So I get fantastic sunsets every night. There's magical cliffs and arches right there. It's a wonderful place. And then I have access to the city where I work 2 days a week as a nurse, and the rest of the time doing my business. And I moved to California originally. We're coming up, May is my 20-year anniversary in California. I came out here specifically for the ocean and for kayaking, to be in rough conditions, surf. A lot of my time is spent in nature, whether that's on the water or hiking trails. Occasionally rock climbing. Haven't done as much of that lately. I would say human growth, human empowerment. So doing things like authentic relating groups, things that focus on what is at our essence and how do we communicate with each other in authentic ways.
Yeah, I love that. So we originally met when you reached out to me about doing some work together, and
Yeah.
I I love that you did. I actually spent a lot of time last year, kind of expanding to work with more men, and
Mm.
working with you is definitely a catalyst for that because it felt like it was such a positive experience. And I always say like the right men always kind of like got through the cracks. And I believe like in your original email to me, it said something like, I see that you work with women, and while I'm not one, I think you still might be able to support me. And
Yeah,
you went
exactly.
on to discuss how you've been looking for somebody that had a skill set with both EFT and ADHD and executive functioning, and sharing some of like the things that you were struggling with at the time, and that was perfect. And that's exactly how I ended up working with all of the men I worked with last year. It was a
Yeah.
similar kind of outreach where it was like, I know this isn't really your niche, but it's like, could we look at this a little bit closer? And I'm so glad that we did. So I'd love to kind of go back to like where you started with EFT because you're also a practitioner. And how did that come into your consciousness?
I'll answer that question first, just speak to a little bit about finding you as well, though.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely so glad I did. And it was, as you said, I wrote you saying, like, I know that your messaging speaks mostly to women, but it was like about the energy that you had. And again, this sense of authenticity and so much in your messaging that is so resonates with me around, for me, I call it permission to be your full self, but whatever it is, it's this place of being authentic, being okay with the messiness and and you speaking on your journey and having intimate knowledge of ADHD, like all of those things just felt really resonant, and so it was really great to do that work with you. And we might talk more about that, but to answer your question on the EFT, I mean, I would say that I'm what I would define as a always been a seeker. From the time that I was probably in elementary school, had a sense of something different in my brain, and also had lots of social anxiety and was always looking for, how do I get out of this? And the first big thing that I found was probably in my early 20s, and that was Tony Robbins.
Mhm.
And he made a big impact. But then in this search, I don't even remember how I came on EFT initially, but it was the Ortner's tapping solution that really
Sure.
brought it to me. And I remember, it's sort of a similar story to you, where you were focused on women and I reached out anyway. Like, they said something in some of their marketing that was around using EFT for organization, that we cannot say that this helps someone with ADHD. And I read that, like, yeah, but it seems like this could help me. And so I've bought the program that they did, and I found it really beneficial. And I sort of, at the time I was working almost full time as a nurse in an integrated medicine office, and I just started sharing EFT as an evangelist, like and like not as a practitioner, but like, hey, here's this thing that I found that's helpful, and maybe you can use it for your stomach issues or your pain or your anxiety about this.
Sure.
And then I realized, you know what, I should become a practitioner in this. I was already a life coach, but I actually wasn't doing a lot with my life coaching. And part of that was my own insecurities and not enough stories. And EFT really helped me move the dial on that, and also gave me a focus where I felt like I'm seeing a difference in people, and I'm feeling less anxiety in my own system as I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So before EFT, you were already definitely interested in like the mind-body connection. You were interested in
Mm.
healthcare. What got
Yeah.
you into nursing to begin with?
Well, the way that I always described it to people when I was in nursing school was I tripped and fell into nursing. I read a book many years before I got into nursing about a woman who became a nurse in midlife, and in it she said, "You never know what you're going to do in life." And I thought, it's true, you never know what you're going to do, but I know one thing for sure: I am never going to become a nurse. And
Never
the
say
way
never.
exactly, I definitely learned that. But the way that I became a nurse was that one of the biggest things that, prior to EFT, that helped me start, there was a time in my life where I remember I would drive around thinking, I wish I had someone to talk to. I wish I had, this is probably my early 20s, some way to connect with other people. And I didn't know how. I was, if you were a human, I was terrified of you. And it was being with Sierra Club in South Florida and the connection to nature, where I got my first solid, like, public speaking relationships, both romantic and platonic, leadership roles. And but it was that connection to nature that really supported all of that. And so I started doing guiding in different places around the world, kayak guiding, multi-day hikes, things like that. And initially, I just wanted the medical experience, so wilderness EMT, regular EMT, paramedic, and eventually realized, oh, I could travel more with a nursing degree because there's travel nursing, and so I can go
Sure.
to different states and do that, and so ended up doing the nursing primarily as a way for when I'm in remote backcountry to, and I was an ER nurse initially, um, so that I would have that skill to be able to support people. But it also was a great way to travel to different states and get a job easily.
Yeah. I would imagine that supported your move to California 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It was even though I came out here for the ocean, I took a 3-month contract, nursing contract, and it was near Monterey, California, and I didn't know that I was going to stay. I mean, I knew I'd stay for the 3 months of the contract, and that was it. And I ended up there was a volunteer position at Monterey Bay Aquarium working with the sea otters, and they wanted a year commitment,
I love
and
otters.
and like yeah, it was an amazing thing. I spent 2 years doing that, and I was like, yeah, I could stay in California for that. And it just everything felt I felt like a kid in a candy store when I was out here. There's so much around nature, so much around human evolution movement. I felt like it just fit me so well, and I've stayed and stayed. I mean, now I'm wondering if what the next place is, or the next place part time, but it's been good.
That's awesome. You mentioned how in your early 20s, like the Sierra Club and things like that brought you into nature. And your business is called In Connection with Nature. So nature's obviously very important to you. Was it a big part of your upbringing before then, or did it really come into your awareness as something you really enjoyed later?
I would say that it was a big part of my upbringing just because it was around. There I lived in South Florida, and especially now I'm in South Florida is so overgrown. At that time, it still was getting that, but there were a lot more wild spaces. And so around, I was surrounded by fields, not a lot of trees where I was, but definitely a lot of open fields. And so catching snakes and lizards and being with the animals, and then we would spend time at the beach as well. So there was not so much a structure to it, but I always loved nature, and in fact, from as early as I can remember, early elementary school, I my goal in life was to be a zoo veterinarian and read lots of books on zoo vets. And the thought was I would travel the world to experience animals that way and in different zoos. And I worked, I think from the time I was like 13, had volunteer or sometimes paid positions in vets' offices. I volunteered at Miami Metro Zoo, and
Oh, I used to love going there with my oldest son when he was little, and we used to live in that area.
nice. Yeah, it was a cool experience. And it was, that at the time, again, while I had fields around me, I didn't have grand nature. I didn't get to see that, and there weren't like miles of trails to hike. And so what I knew primarily was the zoos. Eventually I realized when I got into guiding, oh, I'm doing the thing that I always dreamed of, just with a different vehicle. I'm going out into nature and getting to see the wildlife all over. And it's always been in my nervous system, that connection to nature. And I've just more and more found ways to do that.
Yeah, it's so grounding. And I know one of the things or practices that you're really good at is known as forest bathing. And I don't think we've ever talked about that on this show. So I'd love you to give us a little introduction as to like, what is forest bathing? How do we do it? And what's that experience like when you guide it?
Yeah. I'll start by sharing how I got into it. And that was that, I mentioned coming out to California for kayaking and did a lot of that, and was, teaching it, writing articles for magazines, teaching at symposiums. And I was going to have a series of surgeries in my early to mid 40s, always looking for, mentioning earlier, like knowing something's different about my brain. And what I discovered around the same time was that I had a sleep disorder that kept my brain from going into the right stage of sleep, and I had ADHD, and discovered both of those within months of each other.
That's a
So it
lot to
was
process.
it is a lot to process, and ended up having surgery to partially correct the sleep disorder, and because of the surgery, wasn't going to be able to do the kayaking for a while, and was looking for something, and found this year-long program on coaching counseling, and I didn't take it to do that for others. I took it for my own use, but as I was doing it, it brought in tools from so many different things, and one of the things that we got to do was, as you're coaching, you could coach somebody through dance, you could coach somebody through meditation, you could coach somebody through nature, however you chose to do it. And I would take people out into nature. We were right on San Francisco Bay, and I was having these magical experiences that would happen with people. They were having these great breakthroughs from the way that I was guiding them through nature. But I also had absolutely no clue what I was doing. And my thought was, who am I to say that I know how to do this? And I had never heard of ecotherapy at the time. And I was like, I want to offer this more. I want to be taking people out into nature. And I had been a guide for many years at that point, but that was specifically to take people into nature and have them, enjoy the majesty of nature rather than having a growth experience in themselves. Not that that doesn't give that, it does, but so once I did that, I found some programs that both taught me how to put nature into the counseling modality, but I also found this thing called forest bathing that I had never heard of. Shinrin-Yoku is the Japanese name, and it is a practice that comes out of Japan, and it was originated there. The idea was they were finding that getting people into nature and making concentrated time for it. And concentrated time could be 20 minutes or it could be a few hours, but it lowered cortisol levels, it boosted immune function, it calmed your nervous system, it made you more creative. It was in its infancy when um, in terms of worldwide knowledge, when I first got into it. It has been infused with some Buddhist mindfulness practices, and so the process that I take people through when I'm taking them out, it's again, the time frame can vary, but a typical experience is 3 to 4 hours, and it's giving a series of invitations that get you to really engage your senses, the five senses that we typically know of, but more, we have so many more senses that we don't think about, and so to really use those and be immersed in the natural world, get connected to it. My idea is also, I want people to fall in love with the natural world so that they have more desire to protect it. But I don't speak to that. I want that to happen authentically. But through these invitations, we get to connect more deeply with nature, connect more deeply with ourselves, connect more deeply with each other. And then each invitation takes 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll talk about what am I noticing, whether that's I notice the way the sunlight hits the leaves as they fall from the tree, or I notice the feeling I get when I watch, the sunlight stream through the trees. And that experience of sharing is such a powerful part of it, because it creates this sense of permission to notice things that you might not notice, permission to feel things that you might not necessarily feel. And that, for me, that permission piece is so, I mean, it goes across all of my work, because for me, in my most uncomfortable, shyest days, I felt like I was completely locked up and not giving myself permission to be human, and is something that really supports that idea of like being able to look at people and notice their thoughts, and notice what's around you, and realize, oh, I can just be. I don't have to be perfect. I can just be.
Yeah. When you do it, do you kind of like plop down in one spot and stay there, or do you move about?
Yes. So it it varies. I do public walks where I'm trying to give people an experience of a few different ecosystems. And But I also do custom ones. And so with a custom one, you can decide what you want. But some of them, I mean, I remember I did one that was literally about watching the day change in one place, how the sunlight interacted, how the bird sounds were different. And so you always spend a lot of time in one place, and it always starts with a sense meditation where for 10 to 15 minutes you're in one spot, whether sitting, lying, and I'm speaking slowly in ways that invite your different senses to engage. And again, that is a a sense of permission, and I call all these things, everything that I do in it, um invitations, because I want people to make this their own, and I want people to be invited into an experience, but I also want them to notice, what is my nervous system wanting? Who do I want to be in this moment? What 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 is really drawing me in? I want them to be excited about those things and not feel like they have to, quote, do it right.
Yeah, for sure. No, it sounds like it's a really beautiful and immersive experience. And I have to laugh because I was at a resort last fall with my husband, and they had these nature walks every day, and they were amazing. And there was this
Mhm.
one woman in her, I think she was probably in her upper 80s, who had been going there for decades, and she was a spicy thing. And she enjoyed the walks every day. She showed up ready. It was cold and everything else, and she said to the guide one day, she goes, have you heard of this thing called forest bathing? She's like, I went to this other resort. It was the biggest waste of money, boring thing I've ever done in my life. And all I could think of was, I don't think that she had Gregg as her guide for this, because like she goes, we just sat there. We did nothing for hours. I could have just brought a picnic. Like,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it made me laugh. And I definitely thought of you then, because I was like, I think she probably would have had a much better experience if you had been her guide.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably true. And I also think that people having that sort of experience is powerful as well. I mean, one, in terms of just
Sure.
you noticing what works for you, but two, um, a conversation that I've been having with people lately around, all the dynamics happening in the social world, whether Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, is that, sort of old guard, especially typical older white males, have a lot of resistance to it. And I see that as a natural part of the process for any of it. We all, as much as we may want change, we all have a resistance to change. Change can
Sure.
feel scary, and so one part of the process is to have a little, this, I don't like this. This didn't work for me, or whatever it happens to be. And that doesn't mean that that's the final destination. You can get much further, but
Yeah.
allowing
But how about
that
you
and not
sit with
letting
that
that
for a
part
few
wrong.
minutes? Yeah, no, I do appreciate that, because yeah, there's a value to it either way, whether she loved the experience or she didn't. I don't know
Exactly.
that she was processing it at that deep of a level, though. I think she
Yeah.
was just resisting it. But it
Well,
would
and,
be
and
great.
that and that is, one of the benefits of doing it with someone like me or other guides is an invitation. Even, again, I mean, sometimes I'm pretty direct in it, but I'm direct as in I'm inviting you into this, and sometimes I want it to come a little bit below the surface and not be as directive, and give people that opportunity. But it's nice. I actually had a custom walk for an 80-year-old woman. It was her birthday, and so it was just her and her daughter, and I mean, it was just so amazing to see how she connected with the natural world, and we did it both on the beach and in a forest, and beautiful. And then even to have experiences like, I've taken people who work for the Park Service out and spend every day in nature. But I've worked for the Park Service myself at times, and it can be a thing of telling people, don't do this or don't do that, or picking up trash, which is all important, but it's also, I've had people literally, got Park Service staff literally crying on my walks because like I'm out here every day and I'm not getting to experience it in this way. And it's a reminder of like what's right in front of them.
Yeah, that's powerful for
Yeah.
sure. So, your signature program is called Permission to Be Your Full Self. Do you bring nature into that at all, or is that totally separate from this sort of thing?
It's a little of both. I mean, I definitely bring concepts of nature into the work that I do. And sometimes that's all it is. Occasionally I will do and most of my work is done over Zoom, and this was even
Sure.
before the pandemic because I work with people all over. But some of the time we will do sessions where we're out in nature. And when I say out in nature, that can be, in a forest, or it can be I'm going into my yard and looking at this flower. And occasionally it's even during the pandemic, I was leading these lots of virtual forest bathing experiences, and I told people, it can be a picture of nature on your wall. It
Sure.
can be a plant on your table, finding a way to engage. So I do bring some of that in, but then a lot of it is, I hate to say separate, but yes, it is separate. It's not necessarily
Yeah, we really can't
going
separate from nature no matter what. But I
exactly.
was just curious if that's like your signature program. And what do you help people with mainly in your programs?
So my big focus is anxiety and overwhelm, which is, I mean, a huge thing, and most people have some version of that. But it's this sense, what I would boil it down to, and a lot of I get clients from a lot of different ways, and that includes the physicians at the practice Anatara medicine where I work. They send people to me all the time to work on the emotional aspects of their healing, and whether this is cancer patients or Lyme disease
Yeah.
or things like that. And so whether they come to me that way or they come to me organically through my own marketing, it is a sense, your thing becoming more me. It's my version of that, where
Sure.
people are feeling like it's not okay to be who I am, and they may not consciously have that particular thought, but
Right.
and then again they may, but I'm trying to fit into this role that society says, or I'm trying to fit into this role that my parents instilled in me, and feeling like I have to know how, I have to be perfect, I can't make mistakes. It's at its essence, I would say, around self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, learning to celebrate ourselves so that the ick in our nervous system feels a little bit more solid, and we can start moving forward. Sometimes it's learning, what do I even want? But even when that, as humans, we all put so many blocks in our own ways. And so
Yeah.
really examining, what are the blocks that are keeping me from living the life that I want, and how do I resolve that and move more towards the space I want to be playing in.
Yeah. So, for anybody that's interested in exploring, whether it's like nature-based healing or more intuitive coaching, like it sounds like you do in your program, what advice or invitation would you offer someone that really wants to kind of like unfold their purpose and potential in that way?
It's a big question, but I would say starting just by examining, who am I? What are my values? What excites me? What lights me up? And how do I move towards that when we're feeling, I mean, one sense you could say more grounded, but just more excitement, different neuroreceptors in our brain turn on. We see the world in a different way. And so that first part is a lot around just that self-awareness and self-acceptance. Not, one of the things that I do in my program is celebrating small wins. And I specifically say celebrating small wins because even though I want people to celebrate the big wins, the small wins get overlooked. And a small win could
Right.
be, I'm not waking up when my alarm goes off, and and I you if you wake up 5 minutes after your alarm goes off and you normally wake up 10 minutes after, you could easily beat yourself up for waking up 5 minutes after, but you could also celebrate that, like, oh, I'm moving closer towards the goal that I want. And so finding things like that. How do I celebrate myself? How do I feel proud of myself at the end of the day? And I know that's something for that has been powerful for me, because it is so easy to beat ourselves up. And so how do I actually feel good about something that I accomplished? And it doesn't have to be anything major. It could be I ate one piece of cake instead of two pieces of cake, or whatever the thing happens to be.
Yeah, celebration begets celebration. So
Yeah.
where we start, we're probably going to snowball into bigger and better things, and that's awesome. I love that. And I also love that you like walk your talk. I put out a resource last year called the Better Therapy Checklist, and one of the things that I always come back to when people are like asking me like who should I work with or what's a good next step is like whoever you're going to work with that feels aligned, make sure they're doing work on themselves,
Mm.
because there are a lot of coaches, practitioners, therapists out there that are just kind of stagnating in what they learned decades ago and aren't really like keeping things fresh. And you always seem like you're, continually doing the work on yourself and looking for new ways to expand. And I know, we did some of that when we got to work together last year. And that was beautiful to be able to witness that. I'd love to know what you found to be like the biggest benefits or the biggest transformative points of the work that we got to do together last year.
I'll answer that with in part with a little prelude, and that is, what is always important for me is exactly what you were just saying, is people who are doing their own work, because it is a journey, not a destination, and we always have more inside us. And to use Shrek's analogy, onions have many layers. And so it's like finding that deeper layer. And the people that I work with are people who, which you definitely fall into this realm, are people who not only are doing their own work, but don't come from a place of, I am higher than you, I have more. I mean, maybe yes, somebody knows certain tools and can guide you in certain
Yeah.
ways, but they're not putting themselves as better than. Uh,
Right.
I'm always drawn to people who are fallible and are okay with that and see that as part of the gift of being human. And I remember I had a client who, when she first started with me, I was showing her something about, I think it was about Nick Orton or stuff, and one of the people who she was watching, she said, irked her the wrong way because they were talking about their mistakes. And so it started this long, wonderful conversation on the power of honoring your mistakes, the power of self-forgiveness. And that was huge for her. Like, for her, she felt like she had to be perfect. And so to see that others could accept this thing of not being perfect, it really made a huge difference in her relationship with herself. And so going back to the work that you did with me, that was the thing that drew me in. Just in, I listened to a few of your podcasts, read some of your writing before reaching out to you. And throughout it was a message of acknowledging imperfection, acknowledging the messiness of being human. And even though this is something that I teach, it's good to get it from the outside. And so,
Yeah.
um,
Well, usually the
in
things that we teach are the things that we also struggle with the most,
yeah,
and I come back to that all the time. I mean, I literally just saw a hypnotherapist right before our, session recording this podcast. And, it always comes up the whole like, well, it's like I help people with this all the time with great results. Why do I still get stuck in this place of whatever the thing might be? And, I'm still human. Okay.
yeah, and I mean, there's a few things. One is the shadow, the things that we're not seeing, and it's easier, like someone on the outside. So for you being able to see things that I'm not seeing, but also you have different life experiences. You've done different types of work on yourself, and I mean this as in you, Theresa. And
Right.
as I am sharing my own process with you, I'm going to get different insights from you. Got different ways of working with myself, got a different aha moment. It's so powerful to be talking to someone, working with someone who is not making you wrong for insecurities, not making you wrong for, and when I say not making you wrong, I mean there are those who literally make you wrong, but most people in the therapeutic modality aren't necessarily going to make you wrong, but there still can be a sense of, not fully sure how to say this, but like
Like
not
trying to fix you?
trying to fix you. Yeah. For you, I felt like it goes to that Michelangelo thing of chipping away the parts of the statue that are not valuable, that are not
Everything that's not David, it's got to go.
exactly. Yeah. And so, and that's always what I feel. Again, I said when I was younger, I was so locked up, and literally, I mean, I had to do work on my shoulders of allowing myself to stand in a different position, because I was always contracted when I was younger because I was so terrified of the world. And so the work that I was doing with you definitely was part of allowing me to be the statue of David. And again, I always have work to do, and that will always continue. There will never come a
Sure.
point that I'm done. But I really appreciated, I mean, the tools that you use, both in terms of EFT and hypnotherapy, are certainly powerful. And I love that you would ask questions before a session so that I could share things that would give some guidance for during the session or during a hypnotherapy thing that you would set up. And those, all of that is powerful. But the thing that, again, that I found by far the most powerful was, one, knowing you've gone through a lot of those same things yourself, and so you have a visceral understanding, but also just that acceptance of our humanness, that is what I find most vital in a practitioner.
Oh, well, thank you for reflecting that back to me. And I'm glad
Yeah.
I was able to provide you with a different reflection of yourself through the exchanges that we had. That's really awesome. And yeah, I feel the same way when I get to work with other people. And it's just it is really powerful. And you know, I think it speaks to the fact that I mean, you have a background in hypnotherapy also, and
Yeah.
that you have a background in EFT. And that's why I think like experts and things kind of flock to trying somebody different that has the same tools that gives
Mm.
them a different reflection of those things. And I think that's just really cool because we all end up learning from each other. I always say like I get such gifts from the clients I get to work with because I learn so much and I grow so much, even though I'm the one technically delivering the sessions. So I'm grateful for that and I'm grateful for the work that we got to do together. So
I am as
tell
well.
us, yeah, thank you. Tell us where we can find out more about you and your programs and things like that.
The easiest way to find me is through my website, inconnectionwithnature.com. And then through that, you can also get on my email list. And you can do that by the website, but also I sent you something that you can put in the show notes that is,
Perfect.
I created something that is 5 steps that you can easily implement to support your nervous system,
Nice.
and then support that. I don't want to say eradicate, because I don't believe in that, but like releasing the hold that self-doubt has on all of us. I think we're all going to deal with it no matter where you get, but we can be less reactive to the
Sure.
self-doubt that comes up.
Well,
And so that's what this resource that I'll have you put in the show notes will
great.
offer to people.
Yes, so definitely go over to the show notes and get that resource from Greg. Check out the website. And is there a social media platform that you're most active on or that is best for people contacting you?
I'd probably say the most on Facebook, and I do have a group there. So if you just looked up Gregg Berman on Facebook, you
Yep,
you would see you get access to the group as well.
great.
And then I will be starting my own podcast soon, which well, when I say soon, like in less than a week.
Probably before this airs.
Yeah,
So by
exactly.
the time this airs, you can look up Greg's podcast and check it out. And I
Exactly.
believe from what you said, it's going to have the same name as your business or as
Yeah.
your program.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Permission to
Uh,
be your full self.
Permission to be your full self. And
So
and, and
yeah,
and I will say that although the thoughts of it came separate, it's in part listening to one of your podcasts on the just starting a podcast and just doing it, and that whole experience of like, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, just do something. And I find that that's how I still struggle with those sorts of things, but I also find that that's what works best is just, all right, start and allow it to be messy. And that, in fact, is what my first episode will speak about, is giving permission for the messiness of ourselves.
Yeah, because we are all a little bit messy.
We're
That's
all
for
messy and we're
sure.
all wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any parting thoughts or last concepts you'd like to share with us before we wrap this up, Gregg?
No, I've really enjoyed talking with you. It's great to see you again, and yeah,
Yes.
I'm excited.
I'm so glad that you came to share all this wisdom with us, and I appreciate you being here. And for all of you who are listening, I know you have so many choices when you choose to listen to a podcast. So thank you for tuning in to Becoming More Me. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.